Welcome to Charge Forward Coaching, the podcast for committed athletes and individuals who want to achieve more on and off the field. Hosted by James Blasco, certified mental toughness and resilience coach. You'll gain insights and inspiration from elite athletes, coaches, and others who know what it takes to excel. Are you ready to go to the next level? Then tune in, get inspired, and let's charge forward. Now here's your host, James Blasco.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Charge Forward Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, James Blasco. I'm super excited today because not only are we going to talk about mental toughness and the 4 C's, but we have a genuine expert, Vern Biccum. He is the president of Iridia Medical in Vancouver, British Columbia. He is an expert in mental toughness, the 4 C's. He's a coach. He's also fluent in Chinese, I believe. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about mental toughness and longevity, which is a super important topic. We're going to cover a lot of bases, but I want to welcome Vern to the show. Thanks for being on.
James, thank you so much. Really excited to explore these topics with you. Thank you for the super kind opening. I have to pause on the fluency in Chinese. I can't misrepresent. I'm aspiring to fluency, and one day we'll get there.
But you're a lot further than I am at the moment. I can guarantee that. So we're going to dive into a lot. Totally excited. But why don't you give us a brief overview of your background so people know kind of where you're coming from and who you are?
Sure, I'm happy to. So from an education perspective, I'm a physicist initially, so I have a graduate degree in physics, and then I went on and got my MBA so I could speak the language of business. I thought that was an important piece into the mix, and I've continued on in continuous education in a variety of areas, and as you suggested, now coach as well. I think that where the world is headed, it's really important for us to be able to support people, dynamic, and things are changing all the time. So I wanted to have that ability. In terms of my day-to-day job, I am, as you mentioned, the president of Iridia Medical. That's an organization that our real focus is being a partner in workplace health. So we work with organizations to look after the health of their workforce, and that looks a little different depending on what particular type of offering we're talking about. So we take clinicians, physicians, nurses, paramedics, we put them into the resource industry, which is really active here in BC. We also got started with automatic sternal defibrillators, the things that shock you when you have a sudden cardiac arrest. That's how the company got started. And then we morphed into a lot of organizational health programs, we call them, where we're really, to your point, tying in the ideas of longevity and the pillars of nutrition and sleep and exercise and preventative mental health. And then we also have a front-facing clinic, which does a variety of sort of pre-employment and ongoing assessments of people that we try to feather in the longevity pieces to really bring that to the fore. So that's kind of me in a nutshell as it relates to education and role.
Yeah, when I was starting to do some research for this interview, I said, I'm going to need more paper to write down my notes because you do so much and Iridia does so much. So it's fascinating to me. But we're here today mostly to talk about mental toughness and the 4 C's. And that's a big connection between you and I. I know we both have that connection to AQR International and MTQ and things like that. But it's a passion for me. I know it's a passion for you. Why don't we start with what mental toughness is? I find that most people, they kind of have a general idea, and so did I several years ago, but what we know through the 4C framework is something that they could like get their hands on almost. It's very tangible. Why don't you help us understand what mental toughness is to you?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. There's a bit of, think of it as an image, and it's not quite in focus when you say the word mental toughness. Most people will attach to something, and so what most people will say it's a good thing, but as we define it, it's really it's a personality trait. And it's a trait that helps us understand how people respond to challenges and opportunities that come their way, irrespective of their circumstances. And so that's what it is. And the really neat part about it is it can be worked on. It can be elevated. It can be enhanced and changed. And so that's really the key part. And for us, when we towed into this, and maybe James, I'll just provide a little bit of segues to how we got into this space. We had physicians up in the oil patch working with people, and there was a need to have counselors. And so we were asked, can we bring counselors in? And so we did. And we did that for quite some time. And we just saw that finally organizations were willing to look at preventative mental health. And so we looked around and we looked around for what was out there and what could be provided that would be helpful. And that's where we bumped into the folks at AQR and what you're referring to as the 4Cs model, because it takes mental toughness and it provides a visual for it. Like if you ask most people, hey, is mental toughness a good thing? I think they'll probably say, yeah. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like there's this fuzzy, yeah, in general, it's probably a good thing, but what is it? And then people don't have any real sense of what it looks like or anything. And so enter this model. And it's a great visual that lets us look at it. And so that was really a turning point for us as it relates to it. And that's when we speak about the definition of it for us, it's that trait that can be malleable. And it gives us great insight into how somebody deals with what comes at them in life, because life is dynamic. Nobody's sitting in a
Yeah.
static world right now. So it's really, really insightful. And then it's helpful for them as well. So that's kind of the perspective that we have when we look at it.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I know for me, as I was on my journey for several years, I said there has to be more to this. I don't even know if I was calling it mental toughness at the time, but being able to handle stressors and any situation you're in a constructive, positive way as possible. And I said there has to be maybe I don't know, a system or something like that. But this is more than a system. This is science-based reality of how to operate under very stressful situations. So why don't we dive into the 4 Cs? I'd love to hear your take
Sure.
each of them.
If we put that image up in front of folks, then what we're going to see is that it's a pizza pie, and that makes it nice and easy, right? And the reason that we really enjoy it is that it's super accessible. When you look at that pizza pie, you can take what is a very intuitive and more than likely correct assessment of what it is. So the first, and I always like to start in the control segment, and it has two elements. It has something called life control, and it has something called emotional control. And so life control is really the degree to which you feel you have agency over your life. And when I describe it, I like to think of it as, are you viewing life as you're a leaf in a stream, kind of floating around and bumping against a rock, and maybe a crayfish grabs at you, and maybe you're on the shore, or do you sort of take more energy and try to shape what's coming at you in your life and what you can do with your life? And that's an important piece of overall control. If you feel as though you can shape your destiny, that really allows you to align your actions, and it's super, super powerful. If we look at emotional control, we all have emotions. Every one of us has emotions, and it's a natural part of life. And the key is, how do we recognize them, but not let them overtake us and potentially take us down a path that might cause us more grief than it's worth.
And so that emotional control, to me, it stands out huge. When we go through the rest of the C's, they're all important. I think
Mhm.
emotional control. I work with a lot of athletes, and
Mm.
that emotional control is vital. I know when I was younger, and even throughout my life, there was challenges in that area. And so, what is it about emotional control when the stakes are high that it becomes not just valuable, but absolutely critical that you can control and understand your emotions?
Well, I think because the emotions arise and they could be so intense, and they're intended to, they're I mean, they're not beings, but they're well spirited. I mean, they're coming from a good place, right? Generally speaking, and protective, honestly. And so I think that the rub is if we react, and we've all done it. I think everybody that's listening to this has been in a situation where emotions popped in, they felt compelled to act, and then probably instantly regretted it. Right. And so that's why it's so important. So whether it's in sports, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in business, team dynamic of any ilk, if you react in the moment based on that impetus, the odds of that serving you well can be very low. So you have to be able to have that recognition of, okay, it's here. I acknowledge it. Don't deny the emotion. Don't pretend it's not there. It's here. But then what do I do with it? And that's where the mental toughness factor of emotional control comes in, to be able to say, hey, it's here, get it, but we're gonna carry on. The game's at stake. I can't lose my perspective over this. And so those that have developed and worked on it have developed that ability to do so.
And this is all science backed, research backed. How does that impact and influence, like when you're coaching individuals? How does that help you coach them? How does that help them better understand how to do the things you just described?
Yeah, well, and again, so one of the pieces we haven't yet touched on is the fact that that this model isn't just a standalone model. You referred to it as a system before. So not only is it a model, but it actually comes with a measure along with it. So when we look through the coaching lens, you can have people complete the assessment, and then you have the visual, and you know exactly where they sit as it relates to emotional control. So, and it's a normative assessment. So it's compared to a very large population, and they'll get a sense of where they sit along the scale. And the first thing is that's really insightful for them to understand where they're at. And then, even more helpful is that the assessment comes with reports. And those reports come and they can be utilized by the coach to help bring this to bear, to explore where does this show up in life, and then bring some strategies to bear. So maybe this happens in the field in the moment. Maybe it happens in your relationship at home, maybe with your kids, with your partner. And so the coach can help explore where those points are. And then there can be interventions brought to bear to help better control those in the moment.
It's so powerful. It's such a amazing tool. I know there's other models out there, things out there that people could lead on, but I believe this has got to be the fastest growing model and resource for individuals helping others grow their mental toughness in all of these areas. Let's get on to the next C, and
Sure.
that is commitment.
Mm.
What does commitment bring to the table?
Yeah, so commitment is also, I mean, every construct, which what the C's represent as construct, are very important. And this one is about the degree to which somebody is goal oriented and achievement oriented. So those are the two factors that make up the commitment side. And at first blush, you might think, well, are those the same things? And they're really not. So goal orientation is the desire to have goals and to set goals. And then we probably all know folks that set goals, but maybe don't really pursue them very earnestly. And so that's where the achievement orientation comes into the mix. So if you're able to set goals and do the energy and put the work in to achieve those goals, that's going to bolster your commitment level. And that's incredibly important. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur by nature, and one of the things that I personally believe very strongly is you first make a commitment to something, you tap into your courage, you develop capacity, and confidence comes out of that. And that's really important. So it's starting with that, having that commitment side is so very important. Again, the world is filled with great ideas, but it's the action that actually makes something come forward out of it. So having those goals and then pursuing them is so critically important and boosts confidence and everything of that nature and just so powerful.
You've accomplished a lot so far in your life. What drives your commitment in the different areas that you've been able to focus on and achieve, pretty high success?
Yeah, so I mean, I think well, I appreciate that. I'm doing my best to just kind of keep going in life. And for me, it's about living your dash. I don't know if that's an expression you've heard before, but
Mm.
you have your birth year, you have your death year, and in between you have a dash. And so I think that living your dash is really important. And you only have one life, and soak it up. That's been my approach. And I think that there's great, as I mentioned earlier, you throw yourself into something, you flounder a bit, you struggle a bit, you right yourself, you grow, you develop, and I think that's just incredibly rewarding. It's incredibly important, and it spills over into all other areas of life, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, it's been I wanted to do science, so I studied science. Then I wanted to diversify science, so it was biophysics, bringing those things together. Then I was like, well, what's business about? I'm curious about that and getting that language to overlay. Chinese, I think it's one of the harder languages out there. So I wanted to sort of learn that. I think it's important in where the world is going and such. And so my fuel is driven by my values of living a full life, and that it's up to me to shape my existence and to shape my experience.
And one day you woke up and said, "Hey, I want to be on a charge forward coaching podcast. I'm going to put myself out there." Right.
I had a
Um,
vision. I had a vision, and this gentleman named James popped into it, and here we are, and here we
Here we
are.
are, right? On the
Yeah,
big show.
on
So
the big show.
you kind of segued fairly nicely into the next C, which is challenge. It's one of
Mm.
my favorite to talk about. What is challenge in the four C's?
Right. So as it relates to challenge, you've got your two components, your risk orientation and you've got your learning orientation. And the first is really speaking to your comfort with change, right? And we live in an incredibly dynamic world right now through all measures, politics, financial, technology, AI, learning. And so change is a reality that is coming. And so your comfort with risk and in the form of change is important for you to be aware of. And then the learning orientation speaks more to your interest in learning, your appetite for learning. And it can be both forward, as I say, that's when you choose to learn something about a topic of interest to you, but also mining the historic experiences you've had for the learning that they afford you. Okay. So that's a really, really important piece, I think, in life, as life is dynamic and as it is changing, is you've gone through these experiences and pulling the pieces you like and maybe learning from those that you didn't enjoy so that again you can shape what comes forward with you. And one of the points that's really important to identify and talk about, James, is that with all of these factors, they're measured on a scale. And there's no real right. There's no real wrong. It's not about having a maximum value for each of the factors. It's more about understanding where you sit along the scale and then understanding what's best for your best self. And for different people, it will be different. But having that awareness, which is a big part of what going through and looking at this assessment provides you, is the ability then to, on your own and with the support of a coach, develop and change your particular factor. So somebody might be very, very risk oriented, maybe irresponsibly risk oriented, and we can be careful because sometimes our roles in our profession influence us and we have to see how that ports to our life. So you can imagine, for example, somebody that's in an emergency response environment. There are inherent risks in the role. And they have to sometimes go into those risk environments. They mitigate the best they can, but that sort of approach of taking on those risks may not be something they need to do in their own personal financial planning, for example. And so having that insight as to where you sit and then being able to just see how it plays in other parts of your life is really, really insightful.
I know you talk and work a lot with individuals on longevity,
Mm,
and that's such a big topic, especially nowadays. What do you see the connection with specifically challenge and
mm.
longevity?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, longevity ties beautifully to every factor in this, and that's the elegance of it. Because if you're going to be around and doing anything for an extended period of time, be it sport, be it business, be it anything, you're gonna see change. It's inevitable. No matter what it is your existence is, you're going to see change. So you have to have some level of way to manage that change so that you can be around for that long duration, irrespective of what it is. And so as it relates to health, which is really our primary lens of longevity, you're gonna have to try new things.
Yeah,
I don't know, James, what's your least favorite workout?
my li
Exercise.
burpees.
Okay.
Burpees, yeah. So I
Now,
hate burpees. Hate
I'm
them.
not going to say that you have to do burpees to live a long life, but I might tell you that there could be an opportunity or a time when it makes the most sense for that to be the exercise of choice. So you're going to have to be, I'll give you my example. I don't like squats, but I got up this morning at 7 a.m. and I did my 10 sets of 10. I'm in a build phase. So I did 100 squats today. I don't like
Wow.
it. It's not, but I know it's part of the journey. There's a vision in mind, there's a goal in mind. And so I'll double down and I'll do it. And I think that's the risk orientation piece is you got to do things you don't love. They're going to make you a little uncomfortable, but they're part of a broader plan. And then the learning, you've got to learn you got to learn technique. You've got to learn what it does for you. You got to learn that's important to do things you don't like. You got to learn that, you know what? Any phase of anything is not permanent. It's evolving. It's always changing. And so I think that's how challenge fits into the mix as it relates to longevity for me, both willing to try new things because for longevity, you got to eat different things. You got to sleep a different way. You got to exercise in multi dimensions, and you got to look at your mental health in a way that you probably haven't. And then you got to learn as you're going through all of this, but in a fun way, hopefully.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people, both sports and in sales, that if they don't have the challenge aspect of mental toughness figured out, or at least growing, they really struggle because you get so much rejection and failures and defeat, and the only way to improve is to get better and keep doing it. But
Mhm.
they stop, and it's unfortunate because they're probably most of them were pretty talented, but they just don't understand that yet. And that's where good coaching could come in, right? And they could
Well,
get a better grip on that.
absolutely, and one of the key things I'll just tie in here because it fits so elegantly. You've set the stage so beautifully. I've been invited to dinner. I have to bring this forward, and that is that reflection is so fundamentally important, right? That's a part of learning, and that's something that I think that people struggle with a little bit. And so those folks that you say that if they don't have it figured out and they give up, the sad reality is they may have been making amazing progress. And I'll borrow something from Strategic Coach. It's a group I belong to, and they have many very elegant explanations for things. But one's called Mind the Gap. And so I want to imagine that you're if we can take the audience to the west coast of North America just for illustrative purposes, and they're on a boat, they're on a cruise ship, and they're leaving Vancouver and or Seattle, and they're heading to Australia. As they look out that front off the bow of the boat every day, that view is pretty much the same. Doesn't look like they're making any progress at all. But if they turn and they look and they see how far they've come from Vancouver, that's where you see the real magic. And so being able to reflect, and so maybe you failed and maybe you lost a set in tennis, or maybe you didn't win this, but look at the progression that you've made, the incremental improvements that you've made. Rome wasn't built in a night style of thinking. And that's the value of that reflective element of the challenge piece. That is so, so very important.
Yeah, I personally do that, and maybe you do too. A lot of people, I've learned, I journal, and I'll look back. I did this morning on this date last year, and kind of wanted to see where I was at and see, and it's funny because I remember that particular day after I was reading it, and how I was going to interview somebody well versed in mental toughness as you are, and I could remember feeling like, oh wow, I'm nervous, and how did I handle that? And here I am now with you, kind of doing the same thing, but I feel a lot different. It's easier with you,
Yeah.
your personality and so forth. But it's just something that you should be doing. You should be going back and, reviewing your goals, your journal, all those things to get a better idea and perspective of where you are now. Because 9 times out of 10, you're a hell of a lot further down the road than you ever thought you were. Yeah.
100%. And one of the things that we do at our org is that we look at life, and life is nothing more than a collection of days, right? And collection of weeks. Same metaphor. And so we have, again, it's borrowed from my coach program, but it is a weekly planner. And that weekly planner starts off with, before you talk about what you're going to do for the week, you have to start with the positives from the week that was. And that's by design. You start with that. And it's not just, okay, I did this. It's, why was that an achievement? And then the next phase is, what do you do to keep the momentum, or what's next? Because if you've done something and you're proud of it, it's achievement, you could probably do it in another part of your work or another part of your life, or you could schedule to do it again. If it was a happenstance thing that popped up and you solved it in the moment, what are you pulling from that? So the combination of reflecting, and then later, now you've got an entire quarter, which becomes 4 quarters, which becomes a year. To your point, James, you can flip it out and say, holy, I remember a year ago, I was nervous about this podcast, and now I'm killing it with this guy from Vancouver. Like, it's just
Yeah.
the benefit out of it is just so huge. And it's a simple tool. It's a simple thing to do. But the upside is so great.
Yeah, it truly is. All right. Well, now on to the fourth C. Some say it's the most important C. I don't know if you could say that they're all important, but it's confidence. What what is confidence outside of what people think it is?
Yeah. So again, in this model, confidence comes in two flavors. It comes in a confidence of abilities, inabilities, and then the confidence, interpersonal confidence. And this one's really fascinating when you start to look at teams, I would say. So I've seen a lot of examples, which is tragic, of people that are confident in abilities, but their interpersonal confidence is low. And how that plays out is if you don't know that as somebody who's leading a team or managing a group, that voice is probably not going to show up. You're not going to get that input from them. And so that awareness that that's the case, you can find different venues by which to get that input. And of course, if the person is made aware of that, then they can work on developing that confidence. But it's really important. Life is not a solitary journey. And that's certainly the case with longevity. You're going to put your hand up and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. You're going to need to get some help. So maybe, James, when you're going to do burpees because you hate them so much, like, I don't know how to do, what's the proper form of a burpee? You have to ask somebody, and it might be silly because everybody knows a burpee, right? That could be a response, but it's the no. I want the proper technique. Teach me how to do it. And so, putting that hand up, and whether it's in personal life in the fashion like I just talked about, or work life, or even relationships, and imagine not if you don't have that confidence to state what's on your mind and what you need. Imagine the strength of relationships if you were able to articulate what you do need and what you want. That would be super, super powerful. And of course, confidence and abilities. A lot of that, to me, some of the ways you can build that is, again, that positive reflecting on things and realizing that your abilities are developing, even if they're not at that end state where you want them to be in the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of funny sometimes when I'm talking to athletes, especially young athletes, and they wanna confidence is a big topic. I think
Mm,
emotional control, confidence, those 2 things are probably are the biggest conversations and where people stand on their assessments and things. And
right.
they'll talk about, "Well, how do I get that confidence?" I'm like, "In your abilities? Yeah, practice. Keep
Mhm,
practice and practice, and like you said, reflect and learn and practice, and there's
mhm.
no escaping that. You could have mental toughness in all the different areas, but to be confident, you do have to develop your skill set, and you do have to grow that over time. There's no getting around that, even if you're, so-called, born with that ability.
Yeah, and it's true, and I think that one of the things that helps when people don't appreciate necessarily their abilities is breaking it down, because keep in mind they've got that ultimate vision, being the best player, being the best at X or Y or Z, and breaking it down for them and helping them to understand that, okay, like, let's take a jump shot. Maybe your jump shot in basketball's not going in, but your mechanics are strong, and the right pieces are there. It's just a matter of time, and then things will click. I'm sure in sport you've seen that many, many times where all of a sudden things come together, right? And it takes time. And if you lose the person before the connectivity happens, so tragic, because it was right there, just beneath the surface.
Yep, yeah, and I have seen it, unfortunately, but I've seen the other side too, where somebody increases their dedication, focus, and so
Mm.
forth, and it really changes everything. So I know we covered a lot. We will definitely regroup and do more, but I have a few more questions.
Hit me. Yeah.
What impact has the 4 C's model framework had on you as a person, and also Iridia Medical and your coaching?
Yeah. So for me as a person, I think the biggest insight is, so I got my results. And one of the problems that I have is, I kind of tend to view myself, well, I'm a person. I'm just a person, just like everyone else. And so uh, everyone must be like me. And I think that's not an uncommon thing initially, right? Before you've done the sort of the self-reflection as it relates to this model. And so for me, the big thing was around goal orientation and achievement orientation. So you mentioned some of the things that I enjoy pursuing: tough languages, advanced degrees. That's not everybody's jam, right? And so where that comes to be really important in a team-based environment is, if I don't have the understanding that others aren't like that, I'm going to burn them out. And that's a very, very real risk. And so I have to try, and it's an ongoing commitment on my part to reduce that expectation, and and have the understanding that people are at different levels as it relates to every factor, and in particular achievement and goal orientation. I happen to believe that we can achieve anything. So having that awareness in my case of the fact that I'm super goal oriented, and that having an extensive list of small, medium, and big goals doesn't cause me any angst, but understanding that that may not be the case for the team allows me then to break up their goals into smaller bite-sized pieces that are more likely to keep them engaged in the process. So I don't lose them. They don't become sort of overwhelmed. And that actually, James, is a really important piece for all of the factors. I mentioned it earlier, but it's about being the best version of self. And so when people are very much over to the mentally tough end of the spectrum, there can be some blind spots that appear. And emotional control is an example. And I think that's really worth touching on. I know it's not part of exactly the question, but I think it's valuable if I can take a leeway here.
Absolutely.
Okay. So in emergency response environments, that emotional control imperative. You want to have it, and you want your leadership to be on point and stoic, and holding it all together. Amazingly important. Once that stimulus and that stress environment's gone, you also got to be cautious if you're there and you're very, very mentally tough in the area of emotional control, that people might not be able to read you in other environments. And so if you're having a team that's a multi-generational team, you've got maybe some younger folks coming in that are more accustomed maybe than someone of our generation or older generation talking about how they feel. You want to be, in the words of one of our psychologist partners, a little bit messy to be relatable. And that's a really powerful piece. So for me, that was a learning as well of emotional control, to try to understand how my emotions and how I'm reacting plays for others, and similarly on the goal side of things as well. Now that's my answer. And then as an organization, what we've recently just stepped into is everybody. We used to use the MTQ Plus upon recruitment, but now we actually use it also for everybody that wants to. They've been partnered with a coach, and they can actually go through and develop their mental toughness as they see fit, or any other coaching pursuit that they want. But that's just one way that we're bringing it to bear. I truly believe that the more we know about ourselves individually, the better we're able to show up in any other environment.
Absolutely. I applaud you for that. I think that's outstanding that you can, give that to your organization. That's an incredible gift and opportunity, and benefits them. It benefits the organization. So hats off to you for that. It's funny you bring up healthcare and medical. My wife's a cardiac ICU nurse. We
Oh,
both
wow.
took the assessment. She's she was higher than me at the time, but no shock there. But you're right that she deals with a lot of pressures and stressors, and
Of course.
emotionally she keeps it together. And I think she's one of those individuals that the the balance between what's happening there in that work environment and those serious environments, and then being around family, friends, and other situations. I think she's one of the most self-aware humans I've
Mm.
I've been around, and it makes a huge difference because you can't just stay stuck in that silo of where you are on the mental toughness scale and with any of the factors.
And that's amazing that she is, and I wish that we were all more so. We're all more that way. I think the world would be like I say, a much better place if we all understood where we stood on that, and were able to do that switch. So that's fantastic.
So, just a couple more questions. What do you
Sure.
think is the most common of the factors that people work on when you get assessments and you talk to them? What stands out as the factor that usually is at the top of the list where someone wants to improve?
Yeah, I think in my experience, there's a couple that jump out for me. So one is around goal setting, and I think that call it actually we'll call it commitment overall, because both the goal setting and the achievement orientation, I think. So, I think that when we're younger and we're in school, and life is a little bit more curated for us, we do this, we do this, we do this. When we then graduate, I think that that's where you see a lot of different things manifest. And I think it's possible to graduate, have a role, and kind of get into autopilot. And then you kind of advance, and then some years settle in. You're like, I'm not really sure I'm happy. I don't know where I'm at. And the goal setting piece, because nobody's mandating that you do that. It's not homework. It's not a job expectation. There's not a performance review. Work-related goals are a bit different. In general terms, setting goals and pursuing them, I think, is an area that a lot of folks struggle with, and also the ability to craft them in a way. We don't have to use all elements of the SMART model, but certainly timelines and measurability in your goals being really, really important. And I think that's certainly one area that I would say jumps out at me. And then the other one, we touched on it earlier, is the reflective learning. I don't know, James, do you see folks in your life that make the same sort of mistakes repeatedly? And
Unfortunately, yes, happens a lot.
yeah, and so if we can just support folks to acknowledge, okay, mistake made, awesome, but not just don't be embarrassed about it, don't hide under the sheets, just okay, it happened, I did it, great, and what can you pull from that? Why did that happen? And also do the same with success. Because some people just, oh, yay, success, yeah, and then they right on to the next thing. But hold on, how did you get that success? Like,
Right.
what led to that? There's things there that you can pull forward and then make things better over here. And I think those two areas are two of the key areas for me that I see as goal setting, and the ability to the learning orientation, especially the reflective element.
All right, so here's a simple question, kind of kidding.
Yeah.
Um, what's your message to somebody who wants to better understand not just mental toughness, but how to build that mental toughness and resilience in their life? And maybe they're hearing some of this information for the first time and it's making sense to them, but what would your message be to them about here's the next step you take?
The first thing I think of is I'm gonna borrow a quote and then get to a real tactical next step. Is that a fair approach to this
Absolutely.
answer?
Yep. Absolutely.
So I mean, I think the first thing is have a vision for what do you want? Like, what are you interested in? And start small and act now. That's kind of the piece. That's a Robin Sharma quote. He's kind of our, how would I describe him? He is a more subdued Tony Robbins, Canadian gentleman in the same sort of industry. That's the overarching message is you're curious about it, amazing. Think about it, start small and act now. And then that act now piece, what I would say is look into an assessment like this. This is incredibly, it's a low cost, it's a barrier-free thing. You can have it done and then explore what it looks like and just see what comes out of it. Everybody that we've ever sat with and walked through a debrief, everybody has said, there's been a couple people that says, well, I'm surprised at this little piece. I thought maybe a little bit, but overall, on balance, most people are like, yeah, this certainly tracks. And there's a sort of an awareness, a light bulb that goes off in folks. And that's very, very powerful. And that's a very easy step to be done right away, is to do that.
Yeah, it certainly is. I know when I had gone through it, the light bulb does go off. You're like, wow, thank God that this is here because it really is a roadmap to improve in those areas you either need or want to improve in. Vern, this has been awesome. I'm going to have you back, no doubt about it. How can people either learn more about you, Iridia Medical, your coaching? How do they get in touch with you? All that good stuff.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the opportunity. I do have a question for you before we wrap this up, but I will share that information. So, it is my first name Vern, my last name Biccum. So that's on LinkedIn. That's how you would find me. And then for the purposes of email, it would be my first initial V, my last name Biccum at Iridia Medical, Iridia medical.com. My question
Awesome.
for you, what was the because you've done an amazing job of asking me all the questions, and I'd like to hear from you about what insights did you receive in your profile that you went through? You spoke a little bit about your wife, but what about yourself? What popped up for
Yeah.
you, James?
So what was on the lower side of the score? I came out as a 4
Okay,
overall, 4
okay,
overall,
yeah,
and I was a 3. My lowest was emotional control, and
okay,
maybe that's why I'm fascinated and always have been in that
yeah,
that specific area. And what really stood out was most of the other factors. I was like 4 or 5. I think I had 1 6 in there, but it was, I was right in that middle average, except for emotional control. And like you said, when I saw it, and then I shared it with my wife too. We shared our results. I wasn't surprised because I knew that was an area that I could probably use some work on. Not that that sensitivity is always a bad thing, but I knew for me in certain situations, it certainly didn't help me.
Right.
So it is, and I tell people even when I'm coaching with them, I share that information. It's okay because that's part of the journey, part of the path, the important role that knowing right in front of you is your roadmap to improve in the areas you want to improve. And you have to be honest about it. You have to become aware of this in yourself and be honest with yourself. But from that, you're going to be able to do some amazing things and improve areas of your life and reach some goals that maybe you never thought you got to, just even if you just improved a little, go from a 3 to a 5 or 4 to a
Mhm.
6, something like that. It makes a world of difference. And knowing what it is and how to potentially change it, I think that's life altering right there.
That's great, and
Yep.
you're absolutely right. It truly is, and you made a really a salient point, which I think it goes back to is there's no right or wrong on the scale as to where it is. It's all about for you and your life. What is the way to get you to best self? That's really what's important. The goal isn't to be way over on a 10 across the board. That yields shadow behavior that we have to then be aware of. So it's for you and your context what matters most. And so I think that's a really, really important point. And you're right, the honesty of, hey, this is looking at it, and this is yourself kind of unveiled, if you will, and facing up to it. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it is awesome. I look forward to having more conversations with you. Anything I could do to help you, your organization, I'm happy to do that. Maybe one day I could come out to Vancouver and we could, work there. I'd love to see that part of the world. I know it's beautiful, but happy to do that. And thank you so much for being on. I know our listeners have learned a lot today.
Well, thank you. Honestly, an absolute honor to be here today. It is an open invitation to visit the Iridiaplex anytime you are here. I would be I would be upset if you came and did not tell me that you were coming. So I would love to host. I would love to do some work with you and to show you this great place. And yeah, I hope there's been a value, and any questions that anybody has from your audience, I'm happy to field it. And last thing
Perfect.
I'll say to them as they're jumping into this thing is really be curious, have fun, and be gentle with self. It's a journey.
That's for sure. Be gentle with self. It's a learning process for sure. Well, thanks again. For the rest of you out there, don't forget to like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. You can always go to chargeforwardcoaching.com, learn a little bit more about mental toughness, learn a little bit more about me, my coaching, and maybe even schedule a just free discovery call so I can learn a little bit more about you and your goals and where you're at with mental toughness. But in the meantime, just keep charging forward.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Charge Forward Coaching. Remember, the journey to greatness is built on mental toughness and consistent effort. So head on over to chargeforwardcoaching.com and book a free discovery call to take the next step in your journey. Until next time, stay focused, stay determined, and keep charging forward.